Welcome to video number 7 in my 13-part video series of the 13 big mistakes that beginning saxophonists are making, and even experienced saxophonists are making, that prevent them from moving up to the next level or even getting started in the first place. Now in video number 7, I want to speak about playing in one genre or just learning one genre. This is a very important concept. Keeping in mind the last video before, I spoke about a controversial idea that you start from classical and you go into jazz and other styles. So I'll explain this right now. Firstly, this is the reason why learning one genre is problematic, particularly in the saxophone. This is unique. Firstly, as I've told you, if you go back to my overview video, I've explained that the saxophone was invented by Adolphe Sax, who was a classical clarinetist who invented the saxophone and put it into French military bands. However, despite this, the saxophone found its true voice or true calling in black jazz musicians in America who used the saxophone to make the idiom we now know as jazz. As a result of that, you will be judged as a saxophonist by your ability to play proficiently in popular genres. That is jazz, blues, rock, pop, funk, right? There's even some electronic. There's even some sort of Indian players who play with Indian style of jazz. Because the saxophone has a highly variable intonation, it can play any form of music out there. Because you can vary and you can do many things to change the pitch of the instrument. However, the important thing to understand is this. This goes both ways. Let's first start with classical players. The majority of people who come to play the saxophone will learn from the classical perspective. For what I pointed out in the last video, because actually it is easier. You're starting to learn the ideas of music theory slowly. Over time, you're starting to learn more and more scales. You're starting to get into the deeper levels of the instrument, playing all the way up to the top level of the instrument, 2.5 octaves, from the top, bottom B flat, all the way up to the top F sharp. So the majority of players who I see learn playing the saxophone, some form of music examining board. That's how we work here in the UK. And ABRSM saxophone exams. That's what I use. ABRSM is the leading board. It's the most difficult examinations for musical instruments here in the UK, and that's what I go with. I don't go with all these others. It's what I grew up with as well. But you first learn from the classical perspective. The problem with the ABRSM exams is that they have jazz exams for saxophone, but the jazz exams only go up to grade 5, and there's this assumption that it goes up to grade 5, jazz ain't that serious. No, the reason why it only goes up to grade 5 is the sort of board, in its wisdom, sort of said to themselves, well, we have to have jazz. We haven't had jazz. So when they started jazz back in the late 90s, they put together jazz exams to be used in complement with their other traditional instrument exams. So that is the examination of classical saxophone with jazz saxophone. Having put that into perspective, I find a huge number of classical players who are extremely resistant towards improvising, towards learning to play by ear and the rest. And this is ridiculous. I always say this for the simple reason that you are judged as a saxophonist by your ability to play popular music. There's no two ways about it. This ain't the violin. This is not the clarinet. This is not the trumpet, where you can get away with the idea that, oh, I only read sheet music. No, if you actually say to the man on the street you're a classical saxophonist, they look at you strange and ask, what is that? And the majority of them don't understand. Even if they pretend to understand to you, they don't. So you have to play in many different genres. Another reason why is the classical tradition locks you into the idea of only reading music, and only progress is made by the ability to read music. This sounds ridiculous until you see what happens when music is taken away. I played in the National Youth Jazz Orchestra, and don't get me wrong, the National Jazz Youth Orchestra is an exceptional institution. You get many players who play extremely well. Biggest problem is they rely on reading sheet music. The reason why, to put it quite honestly, is because National Youth Jazz Orchestra meets on a Saturday all day from 8 through to 2. Because of that, in order to get young people up and running quickly with the music, they have to get people to read music. Otherwise, there's no way they can go through the entire repertory, and their repertory is highly complex. But when the music is taken away from them, and you ask a Nigel player, considered in this country of the UK to be one of the top level jazz players, many of the places in our local conservatoires, the Royal College of Music, world famous, and Royal Academy of Music, are taken by ex-Nigel players who do the audition and get in for jazz. These guys cannot play without the sheet music. I'm not joking. You ask them to play popular tunes on the radio, which a hack player, as they like to call them, who's played in Courtney Pine's up-and-coming jazz ambassadors bands, or he's played the day in Brixton. He can play all the popular songs. He can play stuff like Whitney Houston's solo, off-pad. He can play gospel songs. They cannot play like that. You know, they're like, And the reason why is they never actually learn to play by ear. This makes no sense. Second reason why you need to do it is that the two complement each other. There's this idea that playing by ear and actually learning to read sheet music are against each other. No, they actually are twin sisters, and they're two sides of the same coin. And what I mean is this. Where it impedes you is this, and you'll find this very interesting. How many of you have been told, and I'm speaking to the people who are watching here, more experienced players who actually play the instrument, play the saxophone for a while. How many have been told that you actually are very poor at reading rhythms, you know, or you always forget that F sharp, you know, when you're playing a G major scale, or worse still, when you're going to B major, which has 5 sharps. Don't worry if you don't quite understand this. All this is covered in my PlaySaxNow Basics course. And when you play something in B major, you are told, well, you keep missing a D sharp or a G sharp. And you think to yourself, oh, well, I'm a bad player because I can't do this. Actually, the truth is because you can't hear it. You can't hear that you've missed that. The funny thing is, if I bet you my bottom dollar, or rather my bottom pound in this case, that if I actually took and taught you something by ear and you played it, you would play exactly in time and you would not get any of the notes wrong because you would hear the mistake. And because you heard it right in your head, you wouldn't play the wrong note. Now, this is such a dichotomy that many people who have taught this to are like, huh? And by dichotomy, I mean it's a contradiction. You would have thought that if you were poor in reading rhythms and actually reading music in general, it means that you do not really have the skills to play and understand rhythms. No, this is incorrect. This goes back to linking the ability to read music with the ability to play the saxophone. Actually, when you hear rhythms and you actually hear melodies, your mind encodes that information very differently than when you read it. So the same person who will struggle to actually read something actually will be very proficient in hearing it and just playing it back. Yeah, because they're two very different skill sets. Now, the combination of the two will give you your method of learning or cracking any problem you have on the saxophone. But without being given this important skill set, which is called practical musicianship or ear training, in other words, being able to learn to play in other genres in which you're able to bring your own experience to bear, to say, okay, this kind of sounds like a Whitney Houston thing, this sounds like all things there are, this sounds like this, so therefore I'll just add this, then I'll come up with this, therefore I'm here. Without you being able to use this bigger, wider musical imagination, which is based on your ability to hear and play what you hear, you are actually cutting out a massive part of your learning. And this is the reason why you need to play in multiple genres, because each genre of music informs the other. The more genres you know, ironically, doesn't mean that you get poor in playing in all of them. In fact, the more genres you know, the better you are in playing in your chosen genre, because you hear things differently. For example, many of the classical players now have had a much more enlightened thing. I can only speak of one, those who write books. So Rob Buckland makes the point that classical musicians should play classical concertos as though they're transcribing them. In other words, instead of reading the sheet music, you should play the concerto by ear after you've read the sheet music to a certain level and see how that feels like. And actually, when you do that, you find you make less mistakes because your mind is encoding the information differently. So it's really about two different styles. Secondly, playing in different genres gives you a very different idea of what you like musically. And this is extremely important. I find generally most people who like music are really musical snobs. There's no polite way of putting it. This is especially true in the saxophone world. When people say they like jazz saxophone, it's impossible to like every aspect of jazz saxophone. There's just so much of it out there. There's everything from bebop to the playing of Sonny Stitt to Cannonball Adderley to Ornette Coleman, who did the free jazz stuff. So I always ask them specifically, what do you like? Also Kenny G, who many people find very controversial, is an exceptional player, but he's playing of smooth jazz. And of course, that of Grover Washington Jr. is a very different style. So I'm always asking musicians to explore what styles they like and what they like to play, because that's what keeps you playing for longer. And I always ask them, even if you have one particular style, whether it be classical or jazz, go into pop, play a bit of this and that, because what allows you to inform your ear and makes you a better player is playing in other genres, because you're able to see different approaches to the common problems. Believe it or not, there are probably 5 or 6 common problems that we have as saxophonists playing on a daily basis, regardless of what level you are. The difference is of a beginner and an advanced level player is that a beginner can only see one particular path to solving that problem. At an advanced level, particularly a professional level, because we have to play every day, particularly when we're playing concerts with people, we have found maybe 5 or 6 different techniques which we rotate around to solve our problem. The most seasoned pros, in fact, use these techniques subconsciously. They never really think about them until they are forced to actually confronted with students who they have to teach. But what I'm saying is, don't wait till you get to the point where you're a really good player. Now, start experimenting, look at different ways of getting over common problems. And again, I'll explain the common problems which we have in playing the saxophone in my PlaySaxNow Basics course. I don't want to go into it in this series, it will just make it too long. But one important thing is play in as many genres as you possibly can. Experience as much music as you can, because the more music you experience, not only the better are you as a saxophonist, but the better you become as a human being and as an individual. I hope you learned a lot in this particular one. Once again, remember to leave a like, remember to share this video with people and leave some comments below. Now I'll be going on to video number 8, which is learning one method. Right, now this is a very interesting one again, which if you think about, I've touched a lot on in this previous video when I was speaking about multiple genres, but I want to get into it even deeper in the following video for you to realize what I mean by learning using only one method, right? So that next video is video number 8, learning using only one method, and I look forward to seeing you in video number 8. And remember to play your sax now.